Local stories, local people. We're taking you inside Western Mass news. It's the Even Better Western Mass podcast with Dave Madsen.
Welcome to this week's edition of the Even Better Western Mass podcast. Wherever you are, hope you're doing well. We're about two-thirds of the way through the month of January, almost about two-thirds of the way through meteorological winter. So not too bad at all. We had quite a bit of snow in December, but here in Western Mass, really not that much. So here we go, kind of paralleling last winter. So we'll see what's ahead in the month of February. Interesting story to share with you. I never thought, well, I'll make a comparison between Florida and Massachusetts. I recently traveled to Florida and I had to take a COVID test down there, and when I came back up here, I also took a COVID test. Interesting parallels between the two. Both offering the same test. It's the swab up the nose, not the one that goes way, way up, both in Florida and Massachusetts. But I was very impressed in Florida about how efficient it was. You register online, make an appointment, show up the next day for the appointment, hold up your phone, and they scan your phone with all of your information. They give you the test, and you go. And within 10 minutes, we had the results. I took the same test here in Western Mass, waited about an hour in my car, in line. This was over at Holyoke Community College. The folks over there, very nice, but the whole system itself, they don't take any of your insurance information. You fill out a form, your name, address, your email, and your phone number, and where you heard about them. Then drive up and take the test, and they say, well, they'll let you know within 24 to 48 hours, not like the 10, 15 minutes in Florida. So quite a big difference. And I was very surprised by that. I thought, well, if it's going to be more efficient, it would be in Massachusetts, but I was dead wrong about that. So that's my COVID story. I'm sure many of you have had the same test, and hopefully yours turned out negative the way mine did, both of them. Well, let's get to this week's podcast. My guest is Cynthia Simison. She is the first woman executive editor in the 195-year history of the Springfield Republican. Cynthia was born and raised in Northampton. She began her career in journalism in the early 70s with her hometown newspaper, the Daily Hampshire Gazette. She joined the Springfield Newspapers in 1974 as an intern and has been with the paper ever since. Cynthia and I talk about her remarkable career, her most memorable stories, and the challenges facing newspapers in the 21st century. Here's my conversation with Cynthia Simison. Cynthia, thank you for taking the time to be a guest on the Even Better Western Mass podcast. Good to see you.
Great to see you as well, Dave.
Happy New Year.
Thank you. Thank you.
It has been, to say the least, an interesting 2020. And, well, we know that 2021 is off to a flying start for any of us in the news media, for sure.
It is. It hasn't let up. I remark almost every day, I don't think I've worked this intensely for such a prolonged period of time. There's rarely a down day. There's no time to breathe.
We're going to get into your career and, the fact Local Girl makes really good and just a great, great story. But I must tell you, last week after what happened on Capitol Hill, Friday morning's paper, it was an op-ed like I've never seen before. And I saw it and I said, my God, two things. It's bold and courageous. We'll show it. I've got a copy of it here. Yep. What was the decision? How was the decision reached? I mean, I've never seen anything like it.
I've never seen anything like it either in all of my career here or anywhere else in the region. It's the brainchild of our publisher, George Arwady, who said, we need to make a statement. We need to be bold and strong. And there was Our editorial board is composed of a lot of people, myself included, who all have very different and differing perspectives. So there was discussion, and that's the result of it. He felt strongly, and we all did, that something needed to be said.
Just an impactful statement, and there was nothing written. It was all pictures. Mm-hmm. Which I think made it even more impactful. I mean, mm-hmm. The minute you looked at it, it's like, my God, again, like I told you, I've never seen anything like it. And
a photo is worth 1,000 words. Remember that from olden days?
Indeed. What's the reaction been to it?
It's, as you might expect, dramatic on both sides. Comments like yours, and then there are readers who call us despicable and awful, and we're tarnishing the entire Republican Party. And so on Sunday we followed up. We had more than a full page of reaction letters to the editor that we've received, and we'll continue that. That's going to happen again on Thursday. We welcome all viewpoints. We respect everybody's perspective. At least that's been the hallmark of my career. I can see no other way to do it.
Absolutely. And that you can never go wrong that way. I look at this time, a contentious time between an administration and the media. As you look back on your career, as I look on it, the last time I remember anything like this was probably during the Watergate era and the contentious atmosphere between the news media and the Nixon administration. But this seems to be a whole new level.
Yeah. The divisiveness has been really remarkable, and part of it, I dare say, comes from all the competing platforms by which people get their news. Do they know what to believe? I'm sounding a little like President Trump now, and I don't want to do that. but if you follow Twitter, it's a different perspective than if you follow Facebook. If you follow the Republican, it's different than the Washington Post or the New York Times. And people are just angry. And you add in COVID, and all of our feelings are even heightened to an nth degree.
What struck me last Wednesday too, and as we see more video and more pictures coming from this, not only was Congress under attack, but the media was under attack. Mm-hmm. I was watching Martha Raddatz the other afternoon, and there was a sound in her voice. She looked and she sounded like she was frightened. And then when you saw this pile of video equipment and other equipment, and the fact that there were some journalists who were attacked on Wednesday, mm-hmm. This is also a dangerous time to be in journalism.
It is. Yes. And, I've got to say, I was actually in the dental chair for about an hour in that afternoon. But when I got home and I started talking to all of our staff members, what are we going to do online? What's going into print? How are we going to play this? As I watched the video unfold, I was moved to tears. I think the last time that happened was maybe 9/11, and the Challenger explosion. I think about those moments when I was that emotional. I take that back. The Soldiers' Home moved me to tears. These are unprecedented times.
They really are. I agree with you as far as, those different stories, and the fact that as a journalist, you have to try to hold those emotions, but there are times where it's impossible. Mm-hmm. Very difficult.
Yep.
I think the same thing. I think back where the 6 Worcester firefighters died, yep. Where officers in Springfield and right. John DiNapoli and Holyoke died, and yep. and again 9/11 and things like that. It's but everything just seems so different this time around. I don't ever remember where the media has been under such scrutiny mm-hmm. Than right now. Mm-hmm.
And there's. I think you and I talked about it when we met at the Sons of Erin in back of the fall, about there's a level of kindness and respect that I think has somehow disappeared from a good portion of the population. That there used to be a respect for each other, and we disagreed, but we agreed to disagree. And now it's, if you think one way, that's wrong.
Yeah.
I don't get it.
And I see that the other day, watching everything unfold Wednesday in Washington, just utter lack of respect for, to begin with, the history and Washington and the House and the Senate, and those people who serve. I texted Bill Tranghese on Wednesday afternoon and just I wrote to him, "I hope you're safe." Yep. And when he wrote back and when I saw the pictures of what he sent, how they had taken the conference table and pushed it up against the door. Yep. It's like, my God, you look at this and go, this just doesn't seem like us.
No. no, there's something that's gone awry. The passion is on every side is just off the charts. But
Now
the
you
destruction at that sacred place was just horrendous.
just, and especially as we see the other pictures unfolding. I mean, it was one thing watching it that day, but then when you see, of course, the fact that it was recorded on phones and uh, eyewitness accounts from
Yep.
folks who were there, and
Yep.
I think that's the other part of it too. You start thinking of things, and back when you and I started in the business, you in newspaper and me in radio, there were just those were the only sources for news.
Mm-hmm.
And now it's like you said, with social media, all of it's being spread that way too.
Yep. Yep.
It's just a different time. Does social media? I look at it, I think, yeah, there's some benefits to it, but
Yeah.
does it make your job easier or harder?
Personally, it makes it more difficult.
Yeah.
In some respects, I enjoy social media because I think there are benefits to call attention to good stories and positive news and how our communities are responding to things. Um, but then, there are, again, we talked about it in the Neil Morse race this fall. If you followed Twitter, your perception of that race would have been completely different than if you followed traditional media. It just would.
And I think that's part of what we see today is that, and with the other alternate media, with the
Mm-hmm.
Fox News and
Mm-hmm.
MSNBC, where you're getting opinions from all different sides. I mean, you remember the days in journalism school where like, for example, the evening news.
Mm-hmm.
I was always taught that you get a sample of what's going on in the evening news. Then it's up to you to go to the Springfield Newspapers or the Daily Hampshire Gazette to learn more about that.
Right.
But
Right.
those days are long gone.
No, it's like when I grew up in Northampton, we got the Morning Union in the morning, and then the Gazette arrived on the doorstep in the afternoon, and we listened to Ron Hall on the news all day long. So
It's true, but now it's constant. It's 24/7, and in my mind, I've heard, actually, one of the things I've seen over the last few days is a lot of people are abandoning Facebook just because of the negativity that they've seen on it.
Yep. Yep.
That you wonder, as I look at this, it's like the impact that this could have on social media, Facebook and Instagram and Twitter. That people are tired of it.
yeah, yeah. It's one thing on Facebook, I don't talk about politics at all. I have a close group of friends from Syracuse. There's about 20 of us. And some of them have stopped communicating with each other because of the political divisiveness. And it's like, come on, people, we're friends. Remember? Yeah, you're absolutely correct. People are abandoning ship in a lot of these mediums.
I think back, and I've been a subscriber to the Springfield newspapers for a long time. It goes back to the days when my parents subscribed too, when there was a tube out in front of our houses.
Mm-hmm.
So we go way back, and
Yep.
The changes that you've seen through the years, and the changes and the challenges that go along with it.
Oh my. So I started on a manual typewriter. I probably didn't start using a computer until I'd say the 80s sometime. And the evolution has been dramatic. But what's come around, interestingly enough, is so I wrote for the Springfield Daily News, which was an afternoon newspaper, and we had 6 editions, which meant every morning I could write 6 new versions of a story. So, and pretty much now that's what's happening again. You're writing throughout the day as many as 6 or 7 versions of a story. So, what's old is new again in a way with the online universe. I still love coming to work every day. I find it a challenge. I love it. It's important work that we do to keep people informed and bring the latest news to wherever they get the news, whether it's online or in print.
Indeed. Now, you started at the Daily Hampshire Gazette.
I did. I started in high school at the Daily Hampshire Gazette. I was the newsroom librarian, and they let me write feature stories about high school kids. I covered, I wanted to be a sports writer, so I got to cover men's softball during the summer and Holly Junior High School sports during the school year when I was in junior high school.
Now, was this before they moved over to Con Street?
Oh yeah. Oh,
Yeah.
I never worked at Con Street. No, I worked
No,
on Armory Street.
I remember Armory Street because one of the things we used to do at HMP was we did the 1245 local news. And again, as you mentioned, that's when the Gazette was published in the afternoon.
Yep.
And in the times where I filled in for Ron Hall, I would go over to the Gazette, go to the front desk at probably around 11:30, and there were carbons from that evening's Gazette that we would take and we would rewrite that were part of the 1245 local news, which included the obituaries.
Yep. And you'd come through Woolworths and down the back stairs and across the street.
Yep. But that, of course, that was back in the time when the DeRose family owned the Gazette.
Yep.
And before the move was made over to Con Street. Just again, I look back on it fondly as a much simpler time. And I can remember election nights where the hub of election night would be the front lobby of the Daily Hampshire Gazette.
Yeah. Yeah. Yep.
Where everyone would be.
Yep. Absolutely.
And those times have changed quite a bit. So you worked at the Gazette, and then you were interning for the Springfield papers too.
I did. I went off to Syracuse to go to school in summers. Dick Garvey, who was a Northampton guy, grew up down the street from my dad, said, "Sure, we'll take a chance on her. Why not?" And the rest is history. And I just never, I never left the area. I stayed very happily. Worked in a number of bureaus, worked in our Connecticut bureau for a while, and then bulk of my early career was in Westfield, where I say I grew up in Westfield. So
grew up career-wise, right?
Yeah. Yep.
When you think back on those times, obviously a much simpler time. That there were deadlines to meet, and you talk about the number of editions that were written for the Springfield papers too. How that has changed.
Yeah, we used to have bureaus in Palmer and Northampton and Greenfield, Holyoke, Chicopee, Westfield. The Morning Union had a bureau in Berkshire County. So we were everywhere. It was local news at its best.
Really was. Now, is this something you've always wanted to do from the time you picked up a newspaper? I think I could really like this.
I wanted to report on the Red Sox. I was a 67 kid. Carl Yastrzemski was one of my heroes, and I just wanted to be a sports writer. But that didn't happen until about 2002 when Gary Brown and I teamed up to do a series on the remaking of Fenway Park. So my dream did come true. It just took like 30 some odd years to get there.
It's never too late for dreams to come true.
Indeed.
It is also a good time for Red Sox fans, although the last couple of years have been tough. Yeah. And I'm sure you had many opportunities to move to bigger newspapers in different markets, but you chose to stay here at home.
Yep. I loved it. What's not to like? I mean, you've had that experience. Your family's here. There's so much to enjoy, and it's just a great place to live, and that hasn't changed.
No,
so
that hasn't changed. I mean, there's a lot that has changed around here through the years, but certainly not that. As you look through the years of covering stories locally, which is the story that stood out, maybe had the biggest impact on you?
So I may get a little emotional now. My work with veterans has been, without a doubt, the most rewarding. It started a lot because I covered the Air Guard over in Westfield, traveled with them, got to know a lot of the people there. But then for the 50th anniversary of World War II, the publisher at the time, Larry McDermott, said, "I can't think of anybody better. You should do this series." And reflect on the war through the eyes of local veterans, and that started it all. It was just a watershed moment for me. And you know, fast forward to 2020, and some of those men and women, um, I'm sorry, they're now gone. And
Yeah, you mentioned the
the
soldiers' home.
soldiers' home just struck a chord with me that should not have happened. Now I'm getting emotional. It just
That was one of the things I thought too. It's like, here's these men who gave up their lives for the country and survived World War II or the Korean War or the Vietnam War,
Yep.
only to be taken by this COVID. And
Yep.
And as you said, this didn't have to happen.
no. So, but that's I mean, I met incredible people who became my friends. I mean, the survivors of the Bataan Death March. I mean, these are heroes. The D-Day veterans. You just and now, I meet Vietnam guys and Korea men and women who served, and there's still a rich, rich military history that just there's more to be told. So
Their stories, and you think about World War II, and I know my dad and my father-in-law. There's a reason why they were called the Greatest Generation.
mm. Yeah, and I've kind of invoked that as I talk to friends. They instilled in us, you and me, the next generation, I think the right stuff to survive the COVID pandemic. I think they set a standard that we'll get through this. I maybe I'm being too Pollyanna-ish, but we'll make it. It won't be without some sadness and grief, but we'll get there.
Yeah, I agree that, and I think part of that for us, for journalists like you and me and Ray and so many from the paper through the years, was the fact that we were trained by true good journalists who, again, some of them moved on to bigger and better things, but most of them stayed here in Western Massachusetts, just like you.
Durham Caldwell. I
Yeah.
mean, I still learn from him in some ways. He'll drop a note here or there, but yeah, we had good people teaching us along the way. That's for sure.
We did, and I think one of the things that we can do, and I think we try, at least I know we've tried to do, is in part what we learned from them with these young journalists coming in. When we started, it was a much different time, and I see so many young people getting in, especially in the broadcast business today, who I know from my end of it, just like being on television. Not necessarily the journalism part of it, and that's not a lot of them, but there's always a few, and I'm sure you see the same thing. That I want to be the next Woodward and Bernstein. Well, there's only two of them.
But I'm sure there are plenty who've gone through your newsroom just like mine. I mean, I can think right off the top of my head. Dan Lamoth is a guy who grew up in Chicopee, worked at Big Y as a clerk, went to UMass, and he's covering the Defense Department for the Washington Post, doing fabulous work. So
I look at Dan. I'm so proud of him because he was a student in my journalism class at UMass.
Great. Yeah.
Many years ago, but he chose the right path. He went into print instead of broadcast. This is a challenging time for any young person to get into the business that we are in. Granted, there are different ways of telling. Of course, we're all doing it on the web now, and the key word for me through the years, and I'm sure it is with you, is adaptability.
It is. Yep. And the people who come to us now for internships, you have to be a multimedia journalist. There's no doubt about it. You've got to be just as adept doing video as you are writing with words, or making the right calls on social media and what platform to use and when. And it's a complicated world.
I know I used to be, especially in the television business, we wouldn't put a story on the web until it went on the air, and I'm guessing that was the same thing with the newspaper for a long time. But that whole thought has changed through the years now.
It's online first. but as I say, online first, but accuracy first too. Um, Sometimes that doesn't always work out in every venue, but
As in all media too, I'm sure you are doing what I saw happening is we're all doing more with less.
mhm. Yeah, I mean, 20 years ago, we probably had a staff of upwards of 100 people, and um, the staff here at the Republican is about 20, and a team of freelancers joins us, and there's another newsroom at Mass Live. Our partners there have a great team as well.
Now, you are the first woman executive editor in the newspaper's 195-year history. I guess my question is, why did it take them so long?
Men who didn't leave.
You followed some big shoes to fill.
I do have big shoes to fill, but I'm different. We're all different, and maybe it was just time. There were also a lot of women in leadership in the newsroom who quietly went about their work, and I rise up on their shoulders as well. So I can't tell you why, other than I'm just glad it happened.
Well, I look at it too, is you paid your dues.
Mm, I
You
like to
know,
think I did.
yeah, through the year. I mean, I'm sure through the years you've done pretty much every job that has to be done, whether it was at the Gazette or the
Yep,
Daily News
yep,
or the
yep,
Republican.
yep. I covered municipal government. I covered Superior Court. I didn't cover the State House, although I've written enough stories about state legislators, and I still like to write. I still love it. And I feel I have to set the standard for the newsroom. If she's still doing it, I can do it. Is what I hope is the message.
And what I used to tell my students too, it's like, is it writing stories and reporting things is as old as time. It's just how we get that information to the people.
Yeah, yeah. The important thing too is that I try to tell the young reporters is everybody has a story, and some you may find totally repulsive, but you know what? It's still a story that needs to be told. Um, it's just like opinions. We all have them. We all see life through a very different lens, and I don't disrespect anybody.
We hear so much that across the country, the challenges that print media is facing, and that the fact, not the fact, but the rumblings that print media is dying. But that's not the case. We're not even close to that point.
Not yet. Not here. No. In fact, our sister company, Reminders Publications, is starting. They'll probably start 2 to 3 new weeklies in different hyper local markets around Western Massachusetts. I firmly believe people still have an interest in the print newspaper, and if it's seeing their kids' names in the honor roll or whatever, it's there's still a market for it.
Oh, I so firmly believe that. I think it would be a tragic day if newspapers ever went away. And I know it's different from market to market,
Mhm.
but I look at with the Springfield newspapers too. Well, it's a strong core to begin with, and that helps.
Yeah, and I'm not saying that our circulation hasn't dropped significantly. It has, and that's going to happen in every single market. But we still have a strong readership base that works in tandem with our online audience as well.
And I think that's one of the things a lot of folks don't know is the Reminder Publications is part of the Newhouse Group now, and
Hmm.
and that, I mean, talk about going back to the roots of local news. That really is it.
It is, and we publish the Westfield News too, which is Westfield and Southwick and the hill towns. So the other thing that happens here at 1860 Main Street is we do a lot of printing for we print at least 6 other daily newspapers around the region, primarily in Connecticut. We just started printing the Hartford Current.
Right.
We print a whole myriad of weekly business publications from Portland, Maine to Albany, New York, Rhode Island. So we've got a press hall that's running 24/7.
What's a typical day like for you?
Oh, Uh, I get to the office usually about 8:30. Uh, Pretty nonstop till around 6. I go home and I'm still online checking email and staying in touch with people throughout the day. I can have 3 or 4 Zoom meetings like this. I there's still a core of us in newsroom leadership that are in the building. Most of our people are working remotely. So it's a long day, but full. As I said, I haven't worked this intensely in a very long time.
Especially, but when you're doing what you love, it's
Mm.
it's really not work, is it?
No, it's not. Nope. Nope.
Let's talk about the challenges that you faced with COVID-19. One of the things you've talked about is that, yes, that you have a lot of people working remotely. Um, and actually, that's something I know in the television business, and I'm sure in the print business too. Well, people have sort of been doing that for a while.
Yeah. Yeah, they have. And we figured out we could do it. Um, Virtually all of our publications hub, that's the people who design and lay out the pages. Um, Virtually all of them are now working remotely and have been since March. So on their home computers, they put together the newspaper and design the pages. Most of our reporters are working remotely as well. Some come in. I know I've learned uh, I don't enjoy working remotely. I have to be at my desk. If I were at home in the basement like you are, I would be watching Netflix or reading a book instead of working. So I come to work every day. Um, the people who can't work remotely are our press crews, and they got to be in this building. And that's been a challenge here. But we put in place measures, including getting your temperature taken at the door, social distancing, masking up when I'm out of this office. I always mask up. And we've been remarkably lucky, knock on wood. We've had some cases, but they're not as great as one might expect.
Do you ever remember a time like this
Mm.
where I look at this and go, my God, there are very few things that can bring everything to almost a complete halt. But this has in many
Yeah.
aspects of our lives.
Yep. 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 I worry about the older people. I worry, like, Barbara Bernard. She's one of our columnists. She's 93 years old, and she's not getting the socialization she needs.
Yeah.
And I worry about that because how does that affect her column writing? And but God bless her, she keeps doing it every week.
Well, while you touch on Barbara, and actually, right before you brought it, I was thinking about Barbara, the fact that she is still writing a column for the Springfield Newspapers. What a remarkable woman.
Mm-hmm. Yep. Gary Brown, another one.
Gary, yeah.
50 plus years.
I
How
mean,
does that happen?
these are people who literally broke ground in print and with Barbara and in broadcast media too.
Mm-hmm. Mm-hmm.
And the fact that she is pertinent today as she has been in all of her life. I remember talking with Barbara about the column that she wrote about gay marriage.
Mm-hmm. Yeah.
And she wrote that when she was, I want to say, in her late 80s.
Mm-hmm.
And the impact that column had on so many people.
Mm-hmm. She has one coming up. She just had the vaccine a week ago Monday, and she's written a column about that. And I'm looking forward to sharing that. I encouraged her to do it. I said, people need to hear it from somebody like you that's going there to Holyoke Medical Center, getting the vaccine. What did it feel like? How did you feel? And that you did it. So
she's a courageous woman in so many different ways.
Yep.
And it's and Barbara's another one. I find, and I'm sure it happens with you too, that Barbara keeps us honest.
Mm-hmm. Oh yeah. Oh, I get emails, emails and calls. Cynthia,
Or back in the time, emails or calls her, but when Barbara was known for her letters, her typewritten
Yes.
letters for so many years.
Yep. Yep.
You know, I found the first letter I got from Barbara. It's like, oh my God, it's just, I still have it. I mean,
Yeah.
it meant that much. I mean, the honor to be able to hear from her.
Yep.
And, you know, and I look at her and I said, what an example for all of us, to live her life so gracefully.
Yeah.
And so well.
I want to be her when I grow up. So.
I do tell that. I keep looking at it and go, well, I'm getting closer and closer every day.
Oh, you got another 20 years or so. You're good.
Oh God, I hope if I can be anywhere near what Barbara is today, I'll be very, very happy.
Yeah. Yeah.
You know, as you look at the future of the Springfield newspapers and media in general, you know, I've tried to impart advice to young journalists coming up. What advice would you give them?
The best advice I can give is don't report from your kitchen or your living room. You got to meet people. It's still a people business. And I know that's really difficult now, but there's ways like you and I are doing now where you can look a person in the eye. And if you don't do that, you're missing so much of the story. You know, if it's a city council meeting, you know, watch it on Zoom, whatever you do, but don't just make assumptions about people. Get to know them.
A big part of what you've done too is, you know, when you talk about going to these meetings and covering different things, is many journalists in this day and age don't understand the idea of building trust with the people who you're covering.
Mm-hmm. Yep, you need a network. It's important, and trust is key. I mean, I think about the column I did 2 weeks ago on the sword being returned to Westfield.
Mm-hmm.
And they called me and they trusted me with the story. And it turned out that back in 1982, I had written the story when the sword went away. You know, and that was a network. I still, I am proud of my success in building that kind of network in a community that they remember, and they'll get back in touch with you and they'll share things, and that's really, really nice. It's a reward for hard work and getting to know a community.
And you know, you stop and think through the years, and it's probably impossible to put a number on it, but the number of stories that you may have gotten through the trust that you have built in the communities all over Western Mass.
Yep. Yep.
And that is, you know, I think we forget that is a huge sign of respect when someone picks up the phone and calls you and said, you know, I've got a story to tell you.
Mm-hmm. Yeah. Yeah, no, you know, another one from my Westfield days, Dan Smith, school teacher in Westfield, head of the Democratic City Committee. I mean, I learned all you need to know about local politics from him and a few other people in that community. So then fast forward to about 5 years ago when Dan Smith is a trustee at the Soldiers Home, but he ends up as a patient at the Soldiers Home, a resident. And he vowed that he would walk out of that place. And he did. And he called me and he said, I want you to tell my story. And I went, okay, here we go. So yeah, it's trust and respect from the community is you know, as you know, it's the salt of what we do here.
Do you think, you know, as we look at what's going on in this country today, and and around the world too, that word trust is one of the big issues now, that there's not as much trust as there used to be?
Yeah, I think you hit the nail on the head. And people aren't kind to each other, so they don't have trust for each other. So it's all a vicious cycle, I think. And they don't know who to believe and they don't know who to trust. So that's part of Western Mass News' job. It's part of the Republicans' job, and every other media group is to rebuild that trust. And by doing it with the communities where we live and work.
That's probably the difference for us too, being local as opposed to the challenge of the Washington Posts and the New York Times and the Boston Globes too. That we're in the community day in and day out, so it might be easier to build trust that way.
Yeah, I mean, think about all the community organizations you've helped, Dave, over your career, and the connections you've made there that then make people want to listen to your podcasts or follow you. That speaks volumes.
Yeah, that's one of the things I find. I guess it's the same way with the newspapers too. Is with a podcast, it's the opportunity to be able to sit down and have a conversation without clipping out a minute and a half soundbite or knowing that I've only got so many words I can use. We can go on and on. And I guess so. There are some good things coming our way.
Yeah, although, I went back and I watched you with Scott Cohen and Dave Brunell a couple of weeks ago, and I went, oh, geez, I'm part of the oldsters that are lining up here.
But it's folks like us that people want to hear from, because I think there's and not because we're talking about current things, but a lot of nostalgia. People, in times like these, I think people like to think back to what it was like 30, 40, 50 years ago.
Indeed.
Back when it was a simpler time. But you know as well as I do, growing up and reading the newspapers you read and watching the television we read, and you touched on it when we began our conversation, is back then you only had so many sources for news, and now it's just like you're bombarded with it, and throw in social media and it's a cluster.
Yep. And hey, isn't that one of the reasons people still love to read Barbara Bernard, is they get a break from it all?
Yeah. And I think day in and day out, as you go back, it's like, you don't know. And I guess part of the problem right now is that so many people believe what they do see on social media, whether it be Facebook or Instagram or Twitter, as opposed to going to the legitimate sources of news to get the real story. Because you know as well as I do that in our day, it's like, all right, we get the facts from this side and that side, and then you either read it or you see it on television or hear it on the radio, and you make your own decisions.
Yep. One thing before we part ways, one thing I'm working on right now is our annual Outlook economic development business section. And what I'm finding is that there is a lot of good news still happening all across this region. There are people doing phenomenal things in manufacturing companies. There's young entrepreneurs and older entrepreneurs. Don't lose heart, I guess, is the message for 2021. It's going to be tough, no doubt about it. But there are people who have pivoted their businesses and rethought things from healthcare to education. But there's still good stuff happening here in Western Massachusetts.
Do you think that's one of the things we're going to see coming out of this whole COVID-19, that people I've spoken with say, one thing this has proven to me, that we can do things a lot simpler than we were doing them. Yep. And we found different ways to be able to do things.
Yep. No, I edited a column this morning by the president of Greenfield Community College, and very positive, very upbeat about how the community colleges are partnering with four-year schools and just responding to needs and educating not just young people, but older adults too, who need to change their lives as a result of the pandemic. So
when you look back on things, does it seem like you've been in the newspaper business for as long as you have?
So that sword story was my moment, my comeuppance, that I felt like Dick Harvey and Wayne Faniff, and oh God, I've been here too long. But I still like it, so I don't want to leave just yet. I've got a few more years in me, I think.
Don't you think too that part of what we do is it is really crucial for whether it's the Springfield newspapers or the television stations around here, is to have someone who knows this area, and who people can go back to as a resource and say, well, you remember this, tell me more about it. That in so many places, there doesn't seem like there's any value to that anymore. But I look at it and go, to me, that's invaluable.
Yes, absolutely. And your shop had a lot of young people who grew up here and moved up through the ranks. I mean, I think, in our newsroom, Peter Grunin grew up in Westfield. He's been here forever. Patrick Johnson, the same way. Ray Kelly, a Springfield native, he's the managing editor now. A lot of our folks have deep roots in our communities. And, Mark French, our advertising director, he
Sure.
coaches girls softball and soccer in Westfield. I mean, Fran Smith, he's a football coach. All of us, most of us are born and raised here and believe very strongly in all of our communities.
As you talk about that, I think recently the passing of Neil Sheehan.
Mm.
I mean, to talk about someone from around here who did very, very well. And there are so many people who don't know
And
what he did.
changed the world of journalism.
Really did. I mean, he was probably the first, even before
Yep.
Woodward and Bernstein.
Yep. Oh, yeah. Yep.
The passing of really giants like that. And
Mm-hmm.
and you just stop and think, Cynthia, the number of people, and you mentioned many of them, who walked through the hallways of the Springfield newspapers before going on to huge success.
Mm-hmm. Yep.
Many. So those are the hallowed halls, I'd like to call them.
Yes. And will I be the one that turns out the lights? I don't know.
I don't think so. There's a long way to go.
Oh,
And speaking of that, as you look at things, where do you see print journalism in the Republican and other papers like it headed? That's look in your crystal ball.
Well, print's not going to go away anytime soon. No, I think there will always be a market for good reporting, good journalism, good local news coverage. People still need to know what their city councils are doing and how it's going to affect their tax bill and everything else. They still need to know about the health of their water. They still need to know when's that vaccine coming. There's so much that we have grown to take advantage of that requires a free and fair press. And that's TV, radio, print, online, whatever venue it comes in.
Free and fair press.
Yeah,
those are beautiful words.
Aren't they?
My thanks to Cynthia Simison for taking the time to be my guest on this week's podcast. Thanks for watching or listening to this week's edition of the Even Better Western Mass podcast. Wherever you are, stay safe, stay well, and if you can, join me next week.